Hey there folks, welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today it's time we're going to be talking about the new album from Brantley Gilbert, Just As I Am. You know, I've been looking forward to doing this review for weeks now. Because, you know what, sometimes you just know when you sit down to write one of these things that you've got a record in your sights that will just give you plenty of material with which to talk about. An album from an artist that I actually kinda tolerated when I got back into mainstream country without ever really, liking him. An album that from its opening single heralded something that just sent a quiver of anticipation down my side. I was looking forward to this album. Not from any expectation that it would be good, mind you. Brantley Gilbert might have shown up in the country rock scene before bro country took hold in 2013, but he bears the worst parts of the archetype in his music. A sneering douchebag who traded in alpha male machismo and southern pandering in the cheapest way possible. I appreciate that he's got the main writing credits of all of his material, because it made his songwriting that much easier to pinpoint and castigate as the grab bag of formless country cliches that it was, especially on that last album. And speaking as both a country fan and as a metalhead, I was never really all that impressed with his brand of country rock, which always felt too sterile and compromised to really fill in the gap between the two genres in the way an act like, say, Whiskey Myers or Hank Williams III did so easily. In fact, a more easy comparison for his brand of self-serious, minor key saturated post-grunge inspired country rock probably would be Nickelback. But even if you don't like Chad Kroeger or his howl of a voice, you can at least admit he can sing, and he's got some real stage presence. Brantley Gilbert, on the other hand, has a delivery so flat and disaffected on that last album that I got nothing but smug obnoxiousness from his presentation, and it really put me off examining further. So yeah, I was looking forward to Just As I Am by Brantley Gilbert, in the same way that I've been looking forward to Chris Brown's perpetually delayed album X, and that is to give it the righteous thrashing that it deserves. And off the basis of Bottoms Up, an early frontrunner of one of the worst hit songs of 2014, and the noted collaboration with Thomas Rhett and Justin Moore, I expected this album to blow, and I went in with zero expectations. Oh, I take that back, I went in with one. I expected this to be one of the worst albums of the year. Did Brantley Gilbert manage to surprise me? Well, yeah, he did, because this album honestly isn't as terrible as I was expecting. I went in expecting a disaster, and as much as I like to continue on that thread with my established idea and just keep slamming this album regardless, I can't in good conscience and good faith admit that's the case. So yeah, I was wrong. Brantley Gilbert's Just As I Am isn't really that bad at all. In fact, it's actually quite passable, let down by a terrible lead-off single and an image of douchebaggery put forward by his marketing that Brantley Gilbert has somewhat cultivated, likely to his own detriment. Now, that's not saying that this album is anything close to great or even all that good, but you know what, call it the benefit of lowered expectations, because as I said, I went in expecting this to be the worst album of the year, but I can't really hate this album. So let's start with the instrumentation, and honestly, it's no frills country rock. Power chords, solid bass lines, and decent melodies, and enough distortion to really rock, but not enough to jump into metal. And yeah, I'll admit it, the guitars have less texture than I'd prefer, and the solos, they're not exactly impressive, but to Gilbert's credit, he does steer clear away from the majority of bad musical gimmicks that you normally see in bro country production. There are no electronic effects or unnecessary autotune, for instance. There are no attempts to have a rapping cadence, thank God. And there are even elements of organ and gospel that harken more back to blues-inspired hard rock in the whole Whitesnake vein than in post-grunge, and I definitely like that. Now, that's not saying that all the melodies are anything close to stellar. I'm fairly certain that 17 Again took its opening riff from Our Lady of Peace's hit song Somewhere Out There, but the guitar tones do have some richness, and the guitar-driven hooks are memorable enough, especially on My Baby's Guns N' Roses and Lights of My Hometown. Now, let's make no mistake here. Bottoms Up is still an atrocious song. The guitar tone feels jacked from bad, down-tuned nu metal, and the sullen melody line just does not fit in the slightest with the bro country party lyrics. For a song trying to be fun, it just isn't. It's telling that there are songs like Lights of My Hometown and the Thomas Rhett and Justin Moore collaboration Small Town Throwdown that execute a very similar style, but they do it a fair bit better. And yeah, I'll admit it, Small Town Throwdown is leering and stupid and painfully recycled from other bro country, but you know what? It's a better brand of bro country, mostly because the instrumentation has some sleazy grime and some texture. Justin Moore only gets one verse and Thomas Rhett is confined to occasional little snippets, and Brantley Gilbert is actually significantly more convincing as a bro than the whole lot of them. He actually has a presence behind the mic here, and he gets a certain grudging respect from me from that. You know what, in fact, that might be one of the main factors that makes Brantley Gilbert at least marginally more tolerable in my eyes. He might be a swaggering alpha male, but he's at least convincing and sincere in that role, and he never plays up the obnoxiousness. Yeah, if you want a bad boy, might play in the same field as most bro country, but at least has enough self-awareness to question whether or not the sweet girl really wants to follow his path or whether or not she really should, given her background. It does help make the songs like My Baby's Guns N' Roses slightly more believable, and I will give Gilbert credit for cramming that song full of as many references to that classic rock band as he possibly can. I like that. And while I might not like the flag-waving jingoism of One Hell of an Amen, the uber patriotism is downplayed in favor of talking about how a man should face death and his God. And you know what? On a certain level, I can definitely respect that. And since I'm not one to ever disrespect a man's faith, I can definitely appreciate the sentiment behind My Faith in You, where Gilbert worries about how he'd react if he were to lose his faith. Now, granted, I don't think the dramatic stakes of that song are anywhere near as strong as, say, Dierks Bentley's Crisis of Faith on Here on Earth, but Here on Earth is one of the best songs of the year, and Brantley Gilbert does his best to sell his version of that same sentiment. That sincerity, honestly, might be Gilbert's greatest strength as a performer, and it makes the two best songs of the album, That Was Us and Let It Ride, stand out a fair bit in comparison with the rest. That Was Us is a song about old times and reconnecting with old friends, and it's at least honest enough to capture elements like the big talk bros put on around each other and special bonds that they have between each other, and that's the small details that, as a former bro, I could appreciate. And Let It Ride is as good of a hookup song as you'd find on this album, with Gilbert having a reasonable degree of hesitation in the second verse before promising his love despite the miles in the bridge. You know what? It came across as sincere and kind of really felt earned to me. It worked for me. I'm not denying that. Now that said, the other relationship song on this album is I'm Gone, a breakup song, and it's directed at ex-girlfriend of country singer Jana Kramer. And while I don't really like that song, I will give him credit for some marginally fair framing and not engaging in the wishy-washy nonsense in the hopes of leading her on that she might come back to him or plead for his forgiveness. I like that he was relatively straight shooter in that regard. That was good. But so then I started wondering. I'm giving this album and Brantley Gilbert a lot more credit and being a lot more fair to it than even I expected. So is there a possibility that I might actually end up liking this album? Because if I'm being brutally honest with myself, this record calls back to a lot of the shallow hard rock that I really do love, and it's not that far removed from one of my favorite albums of the year, Bang by Gotthard. And you know what? The album is self-aware enough to fit the role well. So why isn't this album clicking for me in the same way that one did? Well, it all comes back to Brantley Gilbert himself, because like it or not, he's not Axl Rose, and his vocals are easily the biggest strike against this album, at least for me. Now, I get why he's singing like this. Having a grimy rasp is likely considered cooler and more appropriate for the whole swaggering bro bad boy image that he's got going on, and I don't deny his voice has texture. But speaking as a singer, when you sing in that sort of raspy voice and that particular range there, it painfully limits your vocals, and it really hurts him when he's trying to come across as more emotional and more sincere. Now, I'm not saying that he doesn't try. I can tell that he's trying to emote more than his delivery allows. And, you know, I'll give him credit there. But his voice just does very little for me. I'll admit that. It comes across as a little bit sleazy. And it doesn't sell some of his more emotional songs as well as it could. And it doesn't help matters when he references hard rock tropes that get me thinking about other hard rock bands and better singers who are fronting those bands. So in the end, you know, I honestly didn't think I'd be in this position. I went into this album expecting it to be one of the worst of the year, but I'm seriously debating whether or not I'm gonna recommend this album. The melodies and hooks, they're well done, even if the solos and texture were seriously lacking. The lyrics, okay, they weren't especially creative, and they can get pretty meat-headed, but their sincerity and occasional flashes of wordplay and nuance, they show signs of a better, promising songwriter here. And look, Gilbert's vocals might not be my thing, but that's my issue. And you can tell that he's pushing his range, and he's at least aware of his limits and what this record set out to be, which is more than what, say, Eric Church can say. So here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna give this album a strong 5 out of 10 for me. But if you're more of a fan of Brantley Gilbert's vocals than I am, and they don't bother you as much, check this album out. Yeah, sure, it's bro country rock in every sense of the word, and I won't even call it the best in this subgenre, because it's not. But it's a pure brand of it than most, and I've definitely heard a lot worse. After all, the album is titled Just As I Am, and for Brantley Gilbert, I can't really deny that this album is exactly that. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you'd like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. Please don't get hung up on the number and the ranking I gave this album. As I said, it's my issue. I don't like his vocals. If they're more your flavor, go ahead, check it out. You'll probably still appreciate the album. If there's anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, or if there's any other albums coming out this year that you'd like me to take a look at, I'd be more than happy to give them a listen. So until then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.